Hello, Matt here from RetroOnly.com. Today we will be discussing whether record players are supposed to wobble. Before we dive into that, be sure and like and subscribe to the channel. Visible wobble may be normal for garbage turntables, but you'll find that 0 is the industry standard for quality machines. Too many people, when their record wobbles, don't seem to understand where the problem comes from. Some of the most common reasons for it happening is the record player could be poorly made or the spindle is warped. So are record players supposed to wobble? Record players are not designed to have any wobbling in the turntable at all. However, in real life, most every player will have some amount of wobbling in it. As long as the movement isn't causing your record to jump or skip, the wobble really isn't anything to worry about. Obviously, we would like a 0mm variance, a perfectly flat platter, when it comes to a turntable, but some studies suggest a perfectly flat platter is not very common, regardless if it has a 0.1mm wobble or a 1+mm wobble. Each individual will have their own level of wobble tolerance. A turntable wobble of 5mm could be fine for most people, whereas someone who is very particular wouldn't like that amount at all. So why do record players even wobble? Most record players will have some small amount of wobble in them. There are some technical reasons for that, but the easiest reason is because getting something perfect is virtually impossible. If you buy a brand new car with brand new tires, you'll find the majority of the time that one of the tires will wear slightly unevenly. This is not necessarily an issue with the car or the tire, and probably won't be an issue at all, but the tire is just slightly out of balance, so it wears a little bit differently. A record player can be like that with a wobble. As the turntable spins, it could have a minuscule variance in the production process that causes the platter to move slightly every time that it turns around. This wobble probably won't hurt anything, including the record or the player, but it is still there. Rega subplatters are subject to some slight variation in how the resin part of the subplatter fits on the spindle, or perhaps the flatness of the resin after it fully cures. A machine subplatter, like on the higher models or the Groove Tracer upgrade, probably does not have a wobble of 5mm, but due to the subplatter/bearing design, some players may wobble a little. Causes of wobbling. Ideally, no one wants the record player to wobble at all, but common mistakes could be putting on a record that is a bit thicker on one side, or is slightly warped. These things won't hurt the record or the player probably, but they can cause it to wobble slightly. Still, if it is stressing the cartridge, and if a dip or rise corresponds to an area in the grooves where your needle has a hard time tracking, you might have some issues. Another way to test where the wobbles come from, and an easy test solution, is to turn a spoon upside down and place it on the deck, and then nudge it up underneath the platter. If the deck drops while turning around, you will hear it scrape the bottom of the spoon. While some experts will say that up to a 5mm wobble is fine, some music fans do not accept that at all. Many music collectors even say that they can hear the wobble by carefully listening to the record play. Other experts believe that wobbling is an issue, and they say that a wobbly platter will introduce imbalance and wowing. They say that this will beat up the main bearing much faster, and it will only get worse with time. The platter and spindle should run true to each other, and then you only have the slot between the spindle and the bearing, and this should only be around 0.001 inches. Leveling your platter. If your player wobbles too much and is causing issues with playing your records, then you will probably want to take the time to level your turntable. Leveling your platter is an in-depth process and would require an entire new video, so if you want to learn how to level your platter, then go ahead and search through all the other videos that are here on YouTube, and you should find tons of options to watch. Sometimes the wobble problem is not with the record player, but with the records themselves. It is very important to keep an eye out for broken or damaged records. If you aren't careful with your collection, they can get dirty or damaged when you handle them. Some proper handling techniques can be found next. Proper handling techniques. First, don't put your records on a shelf with too many records leaning on one unfortunate record on the end. On an overflowing shelf that lacks support dividers, the weight of each record adds up quickly, and you don't want the records on one end to be supporting the weight of your entire collection. And that's why specially designed shelves are a good idea. They're the perfect balance of shelf space and divider support. Similarly, don't stack your records like a deck of cards. If you stack them horizontally, the records on the top will be okay, probably, but on a stack too large or left for too long, you will inevitably add excess pressure on your records that are near the bottom. Because some of your sleeves will have things like drop cards, 7-inch bonus records, album art books, or the protruding zipper from your copy of Sticky Fingers, the unevenness of the packaging will introduce disproportional weight and pressure to the stack, further exacerbating the warping. Sure, go ahead and tastefully stack them up for a nice picture, but be sure and stand them back up post-haste. Simply said, it's bad for your vinyl if you leave them stacked like pancakes. Just don't do it. Finally, don't leave your records in excessive heat. You'll see below that reintroducing heat will potentially help you to tame a warped record, but don't leave your records in a hot car or have them delivered to a sun-scorched doorstep in Las Vegas where you might accidentally leave them for a week while on vacation. For short periods of time, like when your vinyl is on the delivery truck, you're probably fine, but direct heat and sunlight over any extended amount of time is detrimental to the life of your vinyl. Fixing a warped record. Now that we have addressed the basics of how your records can get warped in the first place, next we'll go over a few of the generally accepted ways to remedy the problem. One common way is to leave it between two books for a long time with hopes of fixing it. Constant pressure should flatten your LP into submission, but be careful you aren't doing something more destructive in the process, like adding a ton of weight to a dirty record and grinding a grain of sand into the chorus of Don't Stop Believin'. Clean your record first, and consider leaving the record in the inner sleeve when putting it between your books. That should help prevent dust from building up on any part left uncovered. Some people advise fixing a warped record by putting it between two large panes of glass and putting it in the oven, but attention has to be stressed here. Be careful that you don't ever leave your record in for too long or at too hot of temperature. Too much heat on your records could introduce groove distortion. It might give the appearance of a flatter record, all the while masking the reality of a record that has been damaged. Conclusion. How much wobble you are comfortable with on your player is ultimately a personal decision. Most record players will have some wobble in them, but it shouldn't be so much that your record skips or has other issues playing. Some people try to get their player to have no wobble at all, but for most players, there will always be a slight variance. Even if you are able to perfectly level your platter, there are many records that are slightly thicker on one side than the other, so they will cause your turntable to wobble as well. This has been Matt from RetroOnly.com. Please be sure to like and subscribe to our channel.